Today we are going to be doing a pixel art version of Bob Ross's Mountain Cabin from Season 7, Episode 4. Okay, the first thing that we want to do is do a rough outline of all of the major elements of our drawing here. We're starting with the mountains, the background trees, we're roughing out the lake here. We've got a little square for the cabin, we put the trees in. Basically the idea of this point is just so we know roughly where all the major elements are going to go. Okay, next we need to get started on the sky. First we're going to grab some colors from the original painting, and here we are going to create a palette of those colors. And what I do is I change the value a little bit and then also move the hue a little bit towards the lighter colors as we go. Next we're going to start handling the clouds. We start by blocking in the bigger portions of our cloud structures here. Just kind of making the lighter portion of the clouds as referenced in Bob's painting there. Fill that in. Then we start adding in blobs of color that are going to be the other portions of the cloud. We're not adding much detail yet, just getting the big pieces in. Then we select the background and fill in some lighter colored clouds behind that first really bright colored cloud. And then finally we kind of start mixing all of the cloud colors together by just pulling the colors into one another in kind of a swirling pattern. It gives us a good representation of clouds when we're all done. For the mountains, we're going to start by just creating the general shape of the mountains, filling that in, and then starting to develop our ridge structure for the mountains. And these are the portions of the mountains that are coming towards us, the viewer of the picture here. It's also going to determine where the light is hitting the mountains. As you can see here, the lighter portions are the faces of the mountain the sun is directly hitting, and the darker pieces are the ones in shadow. Continue to add some minor details to the shadowing. Then we want to start adding in some details to the mountain. There's some snow on the mountains here. Snow in the shaded side is probably going to be a little thicker and a little bit darker. I also want to give the impression of a texture here on these mountains rather than giant sheets of a single color, since mountains at this scale are rarely that flat. Continue to add into our details here. We're adding in some shaded areas of the parts that are facing the sun here. We're also giving an indication that the mountain is steeper up top and it gets a little shallower as it gets down towards the horizon here. Still a little bit of snow up there to be seen. More towards the top, less towards the bottom. You can really see the look of the mountains start to take shape in the lower right portion of the picture here, the zoomed out portion of the picture. And we continue to add detail until our mountain range is kind of fully realized here. The dark background trees are the next step to tackle here. So we start by just kind of making vertical strokes here to give the impression of trees. You don't have to worry too much about the shape since they're so far off in the distance. Trying to not be uniform here. I decided they're not quite tall enough, so I stretch them out a little bit. Now I'm adding another color here to give an indication of the sun hitting some of these trees, and also to give an indication that this is kind of a three-dimensional line of trees, not just a single row of them. Then we come to the mid-ground trees. We need to create our colors here, so we grab a color from Bob's painting and then make our palette and start pasting in our blobs that will become trees. Just trying to figure out exactly where these trees are going to live on the canvas. Some more background trees to fix up here. Now I'm going to start giving some shape to these by adding some shadows to the sides of these trees that are going to be away from the sun. And add some more highlights onto the trees here. Trying to give the impression of a tree-like shape. And then the spots that are going to be hitting the sun the most here are the brightest color. And then we kind of mix these colors together, very similar to the clouds. Trying to create a random texture. You can see in the thumbnail version of the picture as the texture kind of comes together for these trees. And I'm already wondering about the color of these trees here. They seem a little bright, so we go into the adjustments and just kind of tone them down a little bit, dropping their value a little bit, re-adding those colors to our palette. Decided I want an even darker color here. Really show off the shadows. I use it sparingly. Next, we need to tackle the lake. So I grab a color from Bob's painting and just kind of fill out the spot that's going to be our lake. I can select the layers behind and use those selections to remove the parts of the lake that we're not actually going to use here, since the lake is the topmost layer right now. Then we're going to add a shoreline here by adding a lighter color where the water is going to meet the shore. We're adding some more bits of the mid-ground in here. So this is going to be a spot for some more bushes. And we begin to add some foliage to these. I'm just using some upward stroke, short random strokes that are indicating grass. We're using colors from our mid-ground trees here. We've got a few colors to work with. We're also going to mix in some of the purple reddish from the mountains. I try to keep a limited palette for each of my works. And some darker colors where the shore is meeting the lake here. And we'll just continue to add some grass detail to this patch of earth here. This piece is going to end up serving as a background for our foreground trees here. But we don't need to make anything too distinguishing here. Okay, next we're going to tackle the trees. So I flip open my line work and I start roughing in the trees here. It's all single color so far. And we start adding some shading, trying to give the impression that they are indeed rounded trees. Since our light source is coming from the right, the lightest bits are going to be on the right, and the shadows are going to be darkest on the left. The trees are not perfectly cylindrical, so we're going to tackle that here shortly. Now that we've got our generalized shadows in place, we can start adding our texture. This is what really is going to make the trees come together. Trying to randomize it as much as possible. Adding a little squirrel hole here. I'm going to add a trunk to this tree. Even though Bob's painting kind of had the trees disappearing into the grass, I'm a big fan of drawing tree trunks. Trying to get the lighting on the root tops of the tree trunk. And just finishing up the last bit of texturing for these trees on the right side here. Alright, now we're going to tackle the trees on the left side of the scene. This is just a single tree kind of split near the bottom. Something bad happened to it during its early years and made it what it is today. So on this side we start in with the texturing right from the beginning. Allows us to go a little faster, I think. We still need to be cognizant that we're using all the colors and that the brightest colors are on the sunward side of the branches. Where the tree splits is going to be a very dark portion of the tree. It's well shaded. And we're also giving this one a tree trunk here. And those are some happy little trees. They could use some branches though. We're gonna rough in the branches here using our same principles as before. Branches are always thickest near the trunk of the tree, and we need to be cognizant of where the sun is going to be hitting those branches and where they'll be shaded. Some of these branches are going behind other trees, some are in front. That helps give a feeling of depth in the trees. Even though we're using pixels, we're not just on a 2D plane here. The foliage is up next. We need to add some foliage to these trees here. We're going to try and keep it light though. We don't want to cover up all of the beautiful tree work we've done. Just adding nodes of foliage here and there on these trees. Giving the rough shape of these leaves and on the branches. All of our branch work wasn't for nothing though. Alright, we're highlighting the sunward side of the foliage clumps here. And also giving some shadows. Alright, our trees are starting to come together. We'll give them even deeper shadows here. And we start mixing these colors together, similar to the clouds and the background bushes. So we've got a little bit of a problem here in that our foreground trees are blending into the background bushes a little bit. We're using the same colors, so we're going to try and adjust the foreground tree foliage a bit, just to differentiate the colors. And we're also going to drop the opacity on it just a touch. That way we can still see that branch and trunk work of the trees. Okay, now it's time to make our cabin. This is kind of the focal point of the scene, even though it's a pretty small portion of the total canvas. So I'm just kind of etching it out here, figuring out what I want the dimensions to be. Put on a roof here. Try to give the impression of either some wood shingles or some kind of roofing. A roof line there with a shadow underneath. Front of our cabin here with a cabin door. I didn't like the way that texturing worked, so we went with the lighter color there. And we got some front steps on there. A bigger shadow on the right hand side. Some ants coming out behind the cabin. We won't see those for very long though. Alright, our cabin fits snugly in behind our trees. But it is the same colors as the trees, so I work on some adjustments. And in the end, I decide to leave it. Alright, we've got some more mid-ground stuff to fill in back behind the cabin here, so we just kind of rough in some more bushes to add those mid-ground bushes. Now we're working on the ground up on the shoreline in front of the cabin here. We had some more grasses there. I was working on the wrong layer. It happened. There we go. Fill in the foliage in front of our cabin. Nice and green. We got plenty of water from the lake here. Add some cattails in. And we're just adding some flowers on top of the grasses, perhaps. Like I missed a piece background there. There we go. Got it filled in. Alright, we've got one piece of grass left just in front of our main foreground trees here. These foreground grasses aren't meant to be the focal point, so we're trying to make them a little bit nondescript. But I do add a few little flowers in there. Adding some darker bits, just trying to keep it textured, make it look like it could be a real grassy hill. I try a number of options for these flowers here. We need to have some of our foliage reflecting into the lake, so the way that I do that is I create a lake reflection layer and end up just copying our foliage, flipping it vertically, and dragging it down into the lake. Then we can apply some transparency to it to make it look like it blends in and is actually a reflection. We need to remember to go back and delete the parts that are over the shoreline, since that doesn't actually reflect. But right now I'm just kind of messing with the different options that we've got for layer effects. I end up just settling on a normal transparency. Got some more reflections. Right in front of the cabin here. Deleting that reflection that's going over the shoreline. And the final bit. Also deleting a little bit in between the reflections to give a sense that the water's rippling. And then we are adding the ripples into the water here at the end. I decide for a little bit lighter of a color of water ripples here. I hope you enjoyed this pixel art Bob Ross painting, Season 7, Episode 4, Mountain Cabin. I hope you'll come back again next time. Thank you.